I'll make you happy for my late wife and son." "What?" I almost blurted out. I wondered whose wife and son he was declaring dead. Eavesdropping further, Thomas uttered something even more unbelievable. "You're all I have left after losing everything. Will you marry me?" I could never forgive Thomas for pretending that his wife and son were dead. To think he would go as far as lying and proposing to such a young woman. Of course, I couldn't just stay silent. When I looked at Brian, he met my gaze and nodded. Then, we stood up and approached Thomas. "Hello, your dead former family here. We've come back from the afterlife just for you, Dad." Thomas's eyes widened in shock at our sudden appearance. It was from there that Brian and I began our revenge on Thomas. "My name is Chloe. I'm a 48-year-old housewife and have been married for 24 years. I grew up as an only child in a family where both my parents were high school teachers. Although my grandmother took care of me when I was little, I spent a lot of time alone after she passed away when I was in middle school. My parents were often away from home even during summer breaks and other long vacations, as my dad coached baseball and my mom coached volleyball. Seeing my friends' moms at home being housewives or working part-time and being home in the evenings made me envious. So, I decided I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom when I got married and had kids instead of being out at work. Being a quiet person, I never had a boyfriend until I graduated from college. My mom got worried for me, so she introduced me to a young male teacher who was a colleague of hers shortly after I graduated from college. His name was Thomas Jones. He had a nice figure, and he was handsome. According to my mom, he was sociable and well-liked by the students. He seemed too good for someone quiet and plain like me. But Thomas, respecting my mom as a more experienced teacher, took our relationship seriously. A year after we met, Thomas and I got married. Having felt lonely as a child, I told Thomas that I wanted to focus on our family instead of work. He agreed, saying he had felt the same as his parents both worked. He wanted me to stay at home. Thomas and I shared the same values. I thought we could build a happy home together. However, Thomas, being sociable, valued his relationships with colleagues and students. That's a good thing, but he often neglected life at home. We rarely spoke to each other, and when we did, it was only when he had something he needed me to do. "I'm glad that you became a housewife to take care of this household, Chloe. I can rely on you for anything." Thomas always flattered me like this, leaving everything to me, even things he could do himself. But hearing this made me feel needed, and I tried to take it positively. I suppose it would have been better to get mad at him and say, "I'm not just a housekeeper, you know." On top of that, since the beginning of our marriage, he would never be home at night during the weekends. He would usually be out drinking with his colleagues or his former students. Indeed, I had heard from my parents that many teachers would drink to relieve their stress. But my parents were different. My mom didn't drink, and my dad rarely went out for a drink out of consideration for my mom. I realized some teachers really enjoyed their drinks seeing Thomas's lifestyle. But I kept quiet at first because it didn't affect our living costs. However, Thomas still kept it up even after our child was born, so I got increasingly unhappy about it. "Hey, Thomas. I get that socializing is important, but can't you say no every now and then?" I had kept quiet until then, but I couldn't take it anymore. Thomas looked puzzled and responded, "What? Why are you asking this now? You never mentioned it before." "Well, my parents told me that teachers have a lot of socializing to do. But I want you to value your time at home too, for Brian's sake." I said this for the sake of my son Brian, but Thomas furrowed his brow as if he was offended. "Look, both of your parents are teachers, right? So, if they come across any problems at work, they can talk to each other about it. But I don't have that, so going out with other teachers for drinks is my only option." Thomas made his point as a teacher. Hearing that made me feel helpless since I didn't work, and it left me feeling lonely. Regardless of how I felt, it must have been lonely for our son, Brian, to have his dad gone every weekend. All I want is for Thomas to genuinely connect with Brian. But Thomas didn't even try to understand my feelings. Despite having these thoughts, I couldn't say anything back to him. Even though I found this frustrating, there was nothing I could do about it, and a rift gradually developed between us. However, our life wasn't entirely lonely. Thomas was well liked by his students, and those who had already graduated and are now working often came to visit him. In particular, 2 of his students, who were the class clowns, have been visiting us frequently in the past 5 to 6 years. Their names are Miller and Martin. They would still come over on their days off even after graduating from college and getting a job. Thanks to them, Thomas has been going out less over the past few years. Brian, now in his senior year in college, has become quite close to them, perhaps because they are around the same age. I feel kind of happy too when they come to visit us with their bright and friendly personalities. They always looked out for me and would bring over cakes and such. Today, they brought a cake over on their day off. But Thomas had been out since the morning. "I'm sorry, guys. My husband has been out since last night and hasn't returned yet." They looked a bit awkward when I greeted them at the door. Perhaps they felt bad for visiting when Thomas was away. "No, we're sorry for bothering you when Mr. Jones isn't here." "But, is Brian here?" "Brian?" "Yes, he's here." Hearing their voices, Brian came out of his room. In fact, he was getting ready to go out as if he had been waiting for the 2 of them to come. "Mom, I'm going out with the guys for a bit." Brian left with a somewhat burdened expression, along with the other 2. It seemed like they had something they didn't want me to hear. Well, boys their age might have concerns they can't share with their mothers. I watched them leave with a sense of unease but didn't say anything. Later, I passed by Brian's room, and I noticed his phone ringing. It's rare for Brian to forget his phone. I went into his room to pick it up. And without intending to, I touched the screen which wasn't locked and caught my breath. It was a message thread from Miller. He sent a picture showing Thomas with his arm around a young woman entering a hotel. The message read, "I don't want to believe it, but the woman with Mr. Jones seems to be from a club. I secretly followed them after they left." Brian replied, "I'll keep quiet because Mom would be shocked if she finds out." That's probably why they came to see Brian. Or maybe they hoped to figure out if Thomas had returned. Anyway, my mind went into a panic. The thought of Thomas cheating. I had an urge to confront him directly, but I hesitated. Brian was in the middle of job hunting, so I didn't want to trouble him with our marital problems. So, I decided to pretend I hadn't seen the message for now. When Brian returned, he still looked troubled. I greeted him, trying to appear calm. Then Thomas came home. He looked puzzled at Brian and I. "What's up? You both look so out of it." An awkward silence filled the air. Brian must have been careful that I don't find out. For a while, Brian and I continued to act as if nothing was amiss when Thomas was around. Months passed, and soon it was almost Christmas. We planned to spend Christmas Eve as a family, celebrating Brian getting a job. However, I was still troubled by Thomas's suspected infidelity and couldn't bring myself to speak up. Then, Thomas said something. "I'll come home late for a year-end party on the 24th of this month, so I won't need dinner." It makes sense that there would be a party on that day. But given the date, I couldn't help but wonder if he was lying. Even so, I couldn't confront him about it, so for the time being, I just replied, "Yes." Lately, I haven't had a proper conversation with Thomas, and I feel suffocated every day. Seeing me constantly like this, Brian made a thoughtful gesture for me. "Mom. Actually, I got 2 dinner vouchers for a hotel where Miller's relative works. It's for the 24th, but let's go together." "Really? You want to take me out for dinner? Don't you have someone else you want to go with?" I asked Brian shyly in reply to his invitation, but Brian answered as if he was trying hard to come up with an excuse. No, Miller and Martin seem to have plans that day. And my friends from school said they'd be spending it with their girlfriends." I decided to accept the invitation because Brian was concerned about my loneliness. It's been years since I've gone out for a meal with Brian. And it's at a very fancy hotel, so I thought I might dress up a bit. I was looking forward to the day with such excitement, but I never imagined I would encounter such misfortune on that day. And then, on the night of the 24th, Brian and I went to the hotel for dinner. It was more luxurious than I had imagined, and I almost faltered for a moment. I nervously entered the restaurant on the top floor of the hotel and was led to our table by a waiter. It felt more like a place where couples come to propose than a mother and son dining together. Looking around, there were indeed many young couples. In particular, the couple sitting by the window with the woman in very flashy makeup and clothes, and... ah! I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the man sitting opposite the woman. He was sitting with his back to us, so I didn't realize it at first, but the man was Thomas. Thomas was dressed in a formal suit like I had never seen before. It was probably either newly bought for this occasion or rented. I was frozen and couldn't move from the spot. I think Brian hadn't realized Thomas was there yet, so I tried to act calm. However, since our seats were close, I could clearly hear Thomas's voice. "I'll make you happy for my late wife and son." "What?" I almost blurted out. I wondered whose wife and son he was declaring dead. Eavesdropping further, Thomas uttered something even more unbelievable. "You're all I have left after losing everything. Will you marry me?" "Me? Really? I'm so happy." The seat was by a large window offering a panoramic night view of the city. She must have been deeply moved by being proposed to in such a romantic atmosphere. Brian, sitting opposite of me, seemed to realize it was his dad's voice and turned around quickly. "Brian, wait." I hurriedly stopped Brian from seeing Thomas's face behind us. But it seemed Brian already realized the man proposing to the unknown woman was his dad. Brian and I silently eavesdropped. Thomas's proposal went on. "You're the best. After losing my wife and son, I had lost the will to live, but thanks to you, the future seems bright." "Really? You rely on me that much?" "Of course. I'm even thankful to my deceased family because I got to meet you." Thomas took something out of his pocket with sweet words. It appeared to be an engagement ring. It looked much more expensive than the one he gave me. I could never forgive Thomas for pretending that his wife and son were dead. To think he would go as far as lying and proposing to such a young woman. Of course, I couldn't just stay silent. When I looked at Brian, he met my gaze and nodded. Then, we stood up and approached Thomas. "Hello, your dead former family here. We've come back from the afterlife just for you, Dad." Thomas's eyes widened in shock at our sudden appearance. The mistress, not understanding what was going on, looked surprised. "Who's this woman? And the mama's boy? Do you know them, Thomas?" "Who knows? They're total strangers. Just some troublemakers, I guess. Just ignore them." Thomas tried to brush it off, but sweat was trickling down his forehead. The woman glared at us, thinking that Brian and I were just here to cause trouble. "Hey, what's your problem, lady? You can't harass us like this just because you're jealous of our happiness." "It's not harassment. You're being deceived. This man is Thomas. He's my husband." "Oh, sure, the name matches, but does that prove he's your husband? If you're going to make baseless accusations, I'll call the police." "We have proof right here," Brian said and took an envelope out of his bag. Inside was our marriage certificate. Arya, the mistress, grabbed it and showed it to Thomas. "What's this about, Thomas? You said you had lost your wife and child." Confronted by Arya, Thomas shrunk back, unable to say anything. That was when I wondered. Why had Brian brought something like that? Noticing my puzzled look, Brian seemed to catch on to my question. Then, looking at Thomas, he said, "Dad, I've known for a while now that you've been cheating on Mom with this woman. And I found out you'd be meeting her here today." "What are you talking about?" Thomas still tried to play dumb at this point. What an awfully stubborn man. "Ha!" Brian scoffed at those words. "There's no escaping it now, Dad. I've got the whole proposal recorded on my phone. What are you talking about? You don't have one on you right now. If you're wondering where it is, the attorney sitting over there has it. Brian pointed to a seat where Martin and a man around 50 were seated. Miller emerged from the back of the restaurant. It seemed like they had planned this together in advance to confront Thomas about his affair. I was surprised Brian had orchestrated this. Then, the man with Martin approached us. Hello, I'm Martin's father. I hear that you have always been very kind to my son. Oh, Martin's father. It's been a long time. Well, I believe this is actually the first time seeing you in person, sir. I'm ashamed to say I've left everything concerning my son's school to my wife. Are you here for dinner with your family today? Thomas seemed puzzled to find Martin and his father at such a place. Then Martin, sitting next to his dad, spoke up. I asked him to be here with me, sir. My father's a lawyer. When I told him I had something I wanted him to look into, he had a friend investigate and found out you'd be here today with your mistress. Thomas looked surprised when he heard that Martin's father was a lawyer and that he was being investigated. Naturally, his guilty conscience must have made him react that way. I had no idea they had gone as far as to involve an attorney and a private investigator. Thomas glared at me sharply. Chloe, what is this all about? I have no idea either. Mom has nothing to do with this, Dad. We're the ones who planned everything. Hearing these unexpected words from Brian, Thomas's eyes widened even more, and he froze in place. I wondered why Brian would go to such lengths. Then, Brian explained how he came to know about Thomas's affair through a message from Miller. Brian had been talking with Miller and Martin about what he could do without me finding out. But the three of them couldn't find a solution on their own, so Martin talked to his father, who is a lawyer. Even though it was a personal request, Martin's father agreed to help and had a private investigator look into Thomas's surroundings. One of Miller's relatives works at the restaurant where Thomas was meeting his mistress that day. They provided the dinner tickets to stake out Thomas. I wasn't sure whether to bring Mom along, but I wanted to clear things up. I couldn't stand the thought of you and Dad just pretending to be a couple anymore. I couldn't bear it. So, that's why Brian invited me here. I thought Brian was still a child. Yet, he had been thinking about his parents this much. I was truly surprised to see how grown-up Brian had become before I knew it. As I was lost in thought, Martin suddenly looked at Thomas and made a shocking statement. Mr. Jones, my father and his friend found that Aria is actually Mia, who was in the same class as Miller and me in our freshman year. What? Her name is Aria. It even says so on her business card. That must be a pseudonym for the club. Don't you remember Mia, who dropped out in December of our freshman year? That's her. Upon hearing this from Martin, Thomas looked at the woman named Aria. Aria? You're that girl, Mia, from back then. What are you talking about? Who's Mia? I don't know any Mia. Aria was desperately denying it, but she seemed to be panicking. Seeing Aria like this, Martin showed us a photo on his phone. A friend of mine went to the same middle school as Mia, and he showed me the graduation album. I took a photo of Mia's picture with my phone. Look at the large mole under the left eye. Isn't it the same as yours? Martin pointed at Aria's face. Aria covered the area under her eye with her hand, but it was too late. She gave up and smiled wryly. If I'm caught, so be it. Yes, I'm Mia, the one who couldn't stand being in Mr. Jones's class during my freshman year of high school. The Mia who was driven out of school because of such an awful homeroom teacher. The room went silent at Aria's drastic change in demeanor. What was she plotting by getting close to Thomas? As I pondered this, Thomas questioned Aria before I could. Driven out of school because of me? What do you mean? You probably don't remember. To you, I was just a mere shadow. Aria began to recount her time back then. She couldn't fit in with the class and was isolated since her first days of school. She also struggled with her studies. She tried to consult with Thomas, her homeroom teacher, who never took her seriously. Although Thomas was well liked by his students, he tended to be favored by the popular ones. So, it was quite possible that, on the flip side, he didn't pay as much attention to the shy, quiet students who didn't stand out. Just as he had been neglecting me at home. I found myself feeling a bit sympathetic towards Arya, even though she was the one Thomas was cheating on me with. Listening to her story, Martin's father placed his hand on her shoulder as she tearfully recounted her high school days. "I understand your pain. But why did you decide to date Mr. Jones without revealing your true identity?" Arya answered, wiping her tears away with her hand. "I wanted to get back at him. I thought making him cheat on his wife would destroy his family. He happened to come to my club as a customer, so I coaxed him into picking me. He didn't know who I was, and I thought if his wife found out he was cheating on her with a girl from the club, she would divorce him." While I felt sympathy for Arya, I felt that her plan was over the top. Cheating is cheating, no matter the reason. Thomas, who had been close to Arya until moments ago, now looked at her with suspicion. "You played with my feelings for such a reason? What about my feelings?" Thomas exclaimed as if he was the victim. I couldn't stand his self-centered attitude and couldn't keep quiet any longer. "Enough! Playing the victim now? Cheating is cheating, isn't it? I've known about it all along." My sudden outburst caused a stir around us. "What's the matter, Chloe? You're not acting like yourself." "I've been keeping it to myself until now. Disappearing every weekend with friends or whatever, and now cheating? I will never forgive you." I let out all the feelings I had been bottling up inside. Thomas seemed unaffected, showing no signs of remorse. "I was bored at home because you wouldn't talk much. So, I ended up accepting invitations from my colleagues or taking my students out for a drink when they asked me for advice. I'm a teacher, after all. It's not my fault. So what? Both my parents were high school teachers, and they cared for my family. You're just making an excuse. It would have been great if you were a teacher too, but anyway, I felt uncomfortable being with a wife like you with nothing to talk about. So, enough, Dad! You're embarrassing us!" Brian's blow silenced Thomas immediately. Martin's father, witnessing the whole scene, tried to calm Thomas down. "Mr. Jones, I heard from my son and my late wife that you are a good teacher. However, family is irreplaceable. I lost my wife 2 years ago, but you have such a wonderful wife. Please cherish the time with your family from now on." "No, that won't be necessary. Let's end this. I've already talked to my parents, and they said I can come back home anytime." I felt bad for interrupting the kind words offered to me, but I needed to make my feelings clear. Thomas looked panic-stricken. "What? What about me? I wanted to split up too, but I was deceived by the person I was planning to remarry." "Deceived? You were the one lying about your wife and child being dead." As we were arguing, Martin's father stepped in. "Looks like it would be best to take this to court. Since it was the husband who was having an affair, the wife can claim alimony in the trial. I will also take responsibility and pay the alimony." Arya, who had been silent until now, seemed to realize the gravity of her actions and offered to pay. Thomas was cornered and had no way out. After the trial, the divorce was finalized. Of course, I was able to claim alimony from Thomas. Arya, or rather, Mia, offered to pay alimony as well, but I declined. I couldn't forgive her for the affair, but she seemed genuinely remorseful. Since Thomas also had a part in her losing her job, I decided to settle things amicably with her. Thomas complained that it was unfair he was the only one paying alimony. He shows zero signs of remorse. Anyway, now that the divorce is finalized, I don't care about Thomas anymore. Later, I heard from Martin and his father that Thomas's affair with a student and our divorce became a rumor throughout the school. The rumors spread quickly among the parents, leading to a flood of complaints to the school. This led to Thomas losing the trust of his students and their parents, forcing him to resign. He tried to find another place to work, but few schools in his area were willing to accept him due to his bad reputation. The only school that offered him a position was located far in the countryside. But Thomas, who had enjoyed popularity, refused, saying he didn't want to be in such an unpopular area. Struggling to find employment and falling behind on rent, he was kicked out of his apartment by the landlord. With nowhere to go, Thomas then attempted to move in with Miller, who was living alone. "Mr. Jones, please don't destroy the respect I had for you. You look pretty pathetic right now." He was immediately turned away with those words. His current whereabouts are unknown. After the divorce, I moved back to my parents' home for the time being. Brian, having found a job, started living on his own and is now completely independent. My parents wished Brian had lived with them a bit longer, feeling a bit lonely. However, I too will be leaving my parents' home soon. As a matter of fact, I've hit it off with Martin's father since the divorce fiasco, and I'm getting remarried with him. He's a busy lawyer but always makes time for me. I probably won't be lonely anymore. And Brian is very happy for us. I feel like I've been putting up with things in my life for so long. But I've decided to move on from that. Having little work experience, I decided to try something new and became a clerk in my new husband's office. It takes some getting used to at first, but my husband and the rest of the staff are kind enough to give me training for my job. I feel very happy being with someone I love both personally and professionally. Life has become enjoyable for me. Now, it's time to start a new life for me.